Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this presentation of the American Topical Association, part of our warm-up to topicals series for this year of 2024. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to mute everybody. Okay, and at this point, I will ask Don to unmute, and I will start with a quick introduction of our program tonight, which is how picture postcards saved the U.S. Postal Department. We're going to look at rural delivery at the turn of the 20th century, rural mail customers and carriers who brought the mail, the popularity of picture postcards, and the advent of how the advent of rural delivery changed the life for millions of people. This is being presented today by Don Hamman, who is president of the American Topical Association, an avid collector of early American postcards, and a creator of many competitive and inventive exhibits. So with no further ado, Don.
Thank you, Eric. We're so delighted. We've got a big crowd here tonight. I think we've got some postcard enthusiasts. We noticed in people that registered that we have many people here that are not yet ATA members. I would like to encourage you to take a look at ATA membership. You know, we've found over the years that most topical collectors also collect postcards. Postcards and topical stamps just go together like peanut butter and jelly. So please do look at americantopical.org. You'll see that we have a wonderful journal, 6 beautiful issues every year filled with wonderful features. We have programs, we have online courses, and you can look at the ones we've had in the past in our store on our website. And if you join, they're much cheaper. Also, we have special events. We have an online membership directory and a whole lot more. We'd love you to take a look at ATA membership. And we kind of think that you folks are interested in postcards. I wanted to point out that one of our advertisers, Mary Martin Postcards, is the largest postcard dealer in the United States. She has an online store and auctions throughout the year, including one that's going on right now, and shows. I was just at her show in DeLand, Florida a couple weeks ago, and it was marvelous. Then I'd like to also remind you that February 15th is the deadline to submit your entry to our My One Page exhibit program. This is a wonderful, popular program that we've had the last couple of years, and people from all over the world enter. All you need to do is use your stamps and or postcards to make a one-page, either 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 exhibit. Tell a little story using your items and submit it through our website, and you'll be amazed at the variety we have and how interesting they are. You can really have fun with just one sheet. Then I wanted to mention our upcoming programs, the next couple of them. Next Tuesday, January 23rd, we have part 2 of Energize Your Stamp Club. Part 1 was a very energetic program and lots of participation, and we had so many people that were interested, we decided to keep it going for a bit. This program will feature Todd Ganser and Michelle Bresso. So do sign up and join us for some lively discussions about energizing your stamp club. And then on January 30th, we have 2 popular presenters returning. Diane and Alan Bauer, our friends from Hungaria Stamp Exchange, a dealership that specializes in stamps of Eastern Europe. And they're going to give us a tour of the Dalmatian coast to Budapest. Their programs are always beautifully illustrated, and I know you'll enjoy that. So you can go on the ATA website and sign up for those. Now I'm going to hope for the best and share screen. As I said, I'm a postcard collector and exhibitor. I'm passionate about postcards. I collect early 20th century American postcards primarily. And the reason that I really love picture postcards is because they tell us things about American culture, what people were thinking and doing and enjoying in around 1900 to 1915 in a way that we would have no other way to know about. I'm going to begin with a very brief overview of real photo postcards, so you'll appreciate what you're going to be seeing tonight, which is a lot of unusual, rare picture postcards. I could make a whole program out of what was on the back of postcards, but basically what you need to know this evening is that before 1907, you could not put a message on the back of a postcard. So people did send picture postcards, but they weren't really popular because people, just put an address. They weren't really anything that people wanted to send much. But in 1907, under pressure really from the public, the Universal Postal Union declared that it was okay to put a message on the back of a card, and thus started what we call the divided back era. The very day after the Universal Postal Union made this ruling, the U.S. Postmaster General issued order number 146 that said basically the same thing. All of this made the picture postcard the perfect medium for short messages. It was the early 20th century version of a text message. In 1903, the Kodak company, which was very innovative in that era, brought out the 3A camera. Both amateur and professional used this camera. The unique thing about this camera was the film was the size of a postcard, and cards and film could be developed onto cardstock, like the picture you see of the postcard there. And people could have postcards, very unique postcards of their family or whatever they wanted to take right on the film. These postcards could be sent away, the film could be sent away to Kodak to get the postcards back in the mail. And in later years, just a few years later, there were a lot of home development kits that you could get, and lots of people did try them. If you were around back in the days when they brought out the Apple IIe computer and the furor that it set off, then you can understand what happened when they came out with the 3A camera. Sales just took off. Kodak had a very successful advertising campaign where they showed the Kodak girls, and they were doing all kinds of things. In the left-hand card, she is looking at the soldiers at the front. She's got a sailboat picture there. All the Kodak girls were beautiful, of course. This was a very successful campaign. The real photo postcard on the right shows a woman with her 3A camera. As I said, these cameras were used by professionals and amateurs. In this case here, we have obvious examples of a photo taken by a professional on the left. Look at how beautifully developed that is. The lighting is wonderful. It's a darling little girl. And the photo on the right is kind of overexposed. That's an amateur one. This is a challenge for real photo postcard collectors to determine what is professional, what is amateur. So let's take a look at rural mail delivery in the early 20th century. I think it's really important to say that it was a very proud profession. You can see here that Paul Braska of Kansas had his formal portrait taken in his uniform with his mail bag. And then we see Mr. Holloway from Illinois posing probably in front of his house with his mail wagon. They are both very proud fellows. The image on the lower right is the back of the Illinois postcard, and that is a typical stamp box that helps those of us that collect real photo postcards to tell what year that photo was taken. And this particular stamp box says Azo, which was a Kodak product, and the years for this were 1904 to 1918. In 1890, 41 million Americans, or 61% of the population, lived in rural areas, even very rural areas. They would get to town to pick up their mail only every couple weeks. This particular obviously amateur real photo postcard, you can see that it's overexposed and is crooked, it shows the lady out there feeding her chickens. And, you know, it's a big deal to get your picture taken back then. And I could just imagine her husband there said, well, if you're going to get in the picture, I'm going to get in the picture. So he brought his pig. I hope you can see it. And he's weighing a pig next to the chickens there. Of course, in these rural areas, there was no TV or radio. People only got a newspaper when they went to town. People felt pretty isolated. Enter John Wanamaker, Postmaster General, beginning in 1889. Wanamaker was the founder and owner of Wanamaker Department Store in Philadelphia. He was a marketing genius. I have heard a definition of marketing saying that marketing is finding out what people want and providing it for them. And that's what Wanamaker did very well. Wanamaker wanted to do a lot as the Postmaster General. He wanted a savings bank in the post office, parcel delivery, but especially he wanted delivery to rural homes. He thought that rural delivery would keep the young folks on the farm. It would also enable the Postal Department to close some tiny fourth-class post offices. He thought that people could get news so they would feel less isolated. And he thought that rural delivery would cause roads to be improved if carriers had to get on those roads. Of course, there were critics of a potential rural mail delivery. Local businesses in town didn't want it because they liked it when those people came into town and spent money. People that operated the star routes were afraid that they would lose their routes, which some did. And of course, those fourth-class postmasters didn't want to lose their post office. But Wanamaker was really adamant. He often said rural postal customers pay taxes too. They deserve to have mail delivered just like the people in towns and cities. These picture postcards show a couple of scenes in town. The one on the left shows the carriers lined up in the morning, getting ready to go out on their routes. I thought that this was, these perhaps were city delivery men, but then I looked up Cameron, West Virginia, and found out it's a tiny town near Wheeling. So I think that they were running rural routes there. This was taken in 1914. The picture on the right, it shows has a caption on the back that says, "This is people in the from the office loafing out back and the mailman comes. This is most certainly amateur, one of a kind. The wonderful thing about these postcards is that many or even most are one of a kind. I show the back there just because it's a nice clear barrel duplex cancel from 1913. There, besides Wanamaker, there was another important advocate of rural delivery, and that was the National Grange. The Grange, which is still in existence today, is an organization that promotes agricultural causes and well-being of farmers. It's a very political organization, and as I said, it still exists. Wanamaker left office in 1893, never realized his dream to have rural delivery. However, in 1896, they did have a trial of rural delivery in West Virginia towns. And the reason was William L. Wilson, the new Postmaster General, was from West Virginia. So guess where they did that trial? But in 1902, rural free delivery did become a permanent service. You can see a stamp there that was issued commemorating that. And then this postcard is very interesting. The postal delivery, the rural delivery, was a very political situation. There were jobs given as favors and so forth, and there were a lot of inspectors who were out making sure that the rural carriers were doing what they were supposed to be doing. This particular carrier in the picture relates on the message that in 1910 he rode a 29-mile route. It took 5.5 hours and there were 42 stops. He's justifying his existence. This is an unusual photograph for several reasons. First of all, you can see the photographer's shadow there in the middle on the bottom, but this is a cyan print, which is a very rare type of real photo print. You don't see very many of them. There are people that just collect those because they're so rare. Well, with rural delivery, the quality of life improved dramatically in rural areas. The mail carrier was really a celebrity. Real photo postcards preserve that for us, and we can see these proud people at work. The postcard at the top, a man from New York, I show the back of it because you can see that he had a stamp to cancel his mail along the way. The card on the bottom left looks like the carrier is handing the little boy or girl a newspaper, but in fact, that was the carrier's child, and this was a staged photo that is noted on the back of the card. This particular card has a 1908 New Year's greeting, in Ashland, Ohio. I said that. My husband's mother remembered as a young child going with her father, who was a rural mail carrier, and she told stories about getting stuck in the mud. They were in an automobile, but having to go out and push the car in the mud. Lots of real photo postcards show a child in the wagon or with the father along the way. The carriers canceled their mail that they picked up, and you can see on the left here 2 cards where they've done an X and a scribble, and these are very common way that they canceled. The card on the upper right is a commercially printed card, not a real photo. It's a photo, but not a real photo postcard. And I thought the message on this was very interesting. The man who had this postcard had a 2-hour wait at the train station. And while he was waiting, he took the time to write a postcard and then mailed it when he got ready to go on the train. Well, it was a big deal when the mailman came, and you can see a commercially printed postcard here on the left, and on the right is actually a photograph that shows the rural carrier and the people coming out to meet him. Sometimes, if you got lucky, you might even get to pose for a picture on the carrier's horses. This particular photo, I think, is interesting. I suspect that it is a professional photograph. You can see the mail carrier down there with the 3 little children on the bottom. This is beautiful photograph, clear, beautifully developed, and so forth. I remember as a child photographer coming around with a horse, and the parent could pay, and I got my picture taken wearing a cowboy hat sitting atop that horse. So I suspect that this could have been that kind of a thing, itinerant photographer coming around taking pictures. This particular stamp box is an unusual one, Solio, not a brand that you see very often, used in 1903 to 1920. The fact that it's not used very often might also substantiate my hunch that this was a professional photo, as the amateur ones most always have an ASO stamp box. Solio was also a product of the Kodak company, which was the largest producer by far of the paper to develop the photos on. The Postal Department really tried to get the different communities to standardize their mailboxes. And we see some pretty good attempts there in those 2 postcards. But in reality, people used whatever they had for their mailbox. And that could be a bucket, it could be an empty lard can. Rural free delivery grew rapidly, as you can see here, from covering 100,000 miles with 37,000 carriers in 1902 to 993,000 miles covered by 40,997 carriers in 1910. You can see that they expanded a lot more than they added for the carriers, and that was because they got more efficient as time went by. They added stops. They did it all better. The postcard on the bottom there holds the distinction of being the most expensive postcard that I ever purchased. It's a real photo postcard from 1913 showing the mail carrier on a motorcycle, and he appears to have newspapers, magazines, packages, you name it. And so that this was the same year that Parcel Post was added, and people could get the Sears catalog then. Wow, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. There was no limit to where the rural mail went. This particular card was mailed in 1912, and the message says, they bring the mail by boat in summer, this way in winter. This was from Sheboygan, way up in the north of Michigan, and he was delivering to the Straits of Mackinac. And this ingenious mail carrier put sled runners on his wagon to deliver his mail. Here we see the rural carriers lined up in the morning, getting ready to start their routes. This is a commercially printed postcard. I really love it because this is really something that you would probably never see if it wasn't for picture postcards. The mail carrier would deliver mail, sell stamps, and take mail back to the post office. It was a post office in a tiny wagon. The postcard on the left is a commercially printed advertising postcard, advertising the light runner mail. And this was a pretty popular wagon. We see these a lot in photographs. As time went on, mail carriers did also use automobiles, and more so, as you would expect. As roads improved, they could get through. This particular card was a real photo, and the back indicates that the brother of the man in the picture took the picture, and he actually wrote his name on the film. You could write on film, and then it would appear on the postcard as white lettering. The camera, on the back of the camera, there is a little slot that you would open, and there was a little attached stylus, a little metal stylus, that you could then write what you wanted on the card, and then when it was developed, that would show up. I actually own a 3A camera, and the little stylus is still there. So back at the Postal Service. In 1909, the U.S. Postal Department was $17 million in the red. But by 1911, $200,000 in the black, and continued to improve. What happened? I think we've had some hints here already. Postcards. Postcards were very profitable for the Postal Department. They could carry 120 postcards, £1 for $1.20, compared to 10 cents a pound for other mail. If you only take away one thing from tonight, I think this next statistic is the important thing. Between 1905 and 1909, there was a 410 increase in postal cards delivered, but a 846% increase in postcards collected by the carrier. So people were writing their cards at home, they were getting them ready for the carrier, and mailing them when he got there. This increase in the volume of mail was mostly postcards. This is an advertising postcard. People really took this message to heart. This card was printed by a postcard publisher that I'm sure that most of you have heard of, Kurt Teich, the world's largest ever publisher of postcards. In the peak years, 1907 to 1912, Kurt Teich employed 100,000 people working 3 shifts, 7 days a week, around the clock, 7 days a week, to produce postcards. This company was in business from 1898 to the 1960s. When they went out of business, they donated their archives, which are now in the Newberry Library, and you can take a look at that online. So in 1 year's time, June 1907, when we got that divided back, and June 1908, Americans sent 667,000 plus picture postcards. What were they sending? Mostly holiday cards, but also scenes of their area. And there was one fun category, exaggerated postcards, that you can see the car carrying the giant eggs. This was kind of a cut and paste method where they put 2 pictures together and then took another picture of it, and there are a lot of fun ones out there. It's interesting to know that in Europe, the volume of postcards being sent was much higher. It is estimated that roughly 300 billion postcards were produced between 1907 and 1910. So who were the people that made postcards all the rage? They were young women like Mary and Helen and Margaret. And what did they write on their postcards? Nothing very earth-shaking. Let's see if I read this in case you can't. How are you people? We are all a little better, have all been sick. Fred has been having an awful time with his ear, da 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 da. Another common subject was rain. We had one of the awful rains and storms anyone ever did see yesterday. And they also always write, I'll write more later. They always had the intent to write a real letter, and who knows if it ever happened. I've seen some really funny things. They often refer to having the grip, I think is the way you pronounce that. And I thought, what on earth is that? I never heard of that. And I looked it up, and that was influenza. What do we know about these people that were sending postcards, all these millions of postcards? 90% of them were women and children. The majority were Anglo-Saxon and German descent. It was a big deal to have your photo taken with that expensive $20 camera. And here we can see some views. Looks like on the top, maybe a Sunday school class, people out in front of their house, and these 4 people posing in what was obviously an amateur card, probably not taken with a 3A camera, because you can see that the film was not the size of the postcard. How do we know all this? I would like to tell you more. I'm going to tell you real quickly about a Smithsonian study done in 2013 by Daniel Gifford. He went on eBay and took 1,000 postcards and tracked where they were mailed from and who they were mailed to with census data, and found out about the people that were receiving the postcards. It's a fascinating study that you can read about. There is a book about it, the Smithsonian Institution, Daniel Gifford. Postcards were really the first means of communication that didn't depend on socioeconomic class. You didn't really have to have much money to take part in this fun craze. You could buy it for a penny, you could mail it for a penny. It's an important historic group of artifacts that people exchanged, and one that really, as I said before, tells us a lot about life. They're philatelically important because of the volume and what they did to help the Postal Department financially. The cards that were sent back then were very rarely travel related. People weren't going to Niagara Falls or New York City back in those days. They often presented a very idealized view of rural American life. Fancy clothes, beautiful houses, something that really pretty much really didn't exist. 2 of the most treasured possessions in any rural American home were the Bible and the postcard album. Everybody had a postcard album, and they mounted their cards. When you had company, the first thing that you would do was show them your new cards. This particular postcard, if you can see it, it's this group of 4 women admiring their postcard album. And again, this is probably not taken with a 3A, because you can see the film was not the size of a postcard. I just love this card. Well, you could buy postcards literally everywhere. The photo on the upper left shows the postcard shop in town. This is an interesting photo. People are all lined up along the street, and if you look a little farther beyond, you see that they're watching a parade and the sailors are marching down the street. Below on the left looks like a pavilion at a park. Again, on the street corner, you really could buy them everywhere. I actually have a little collection of postcards of postcard shops, and there are some amazing ones that have many thousands of different kinds of postcards right in one store. And postcard collectors even went to extremes. These people are in Hawaii, uh, scorching their postcards to send to somebody in the volcano. I gave this presentation a couple weeks ago at a club I belong to, and they told me that you can't do that anymore. This particular card is a private mailing card. These were undivided back. These were used in 1898 to 1901, so this is a little earlier than the other cards that we've been looking at. Mail carriers really got into the holiday spirit. The card on the left shows Mr. Grant in 1908 with his substitute, his little child, wishing you a Merry Christmas, been written on the film there. And the one other card, were very creative mail carrier, or perhaps his wife, colored the photo and even added a glitter. Mail carriers could pick out their design and order cards printed with their name, and they always have their rural route number. These are very plentiful. You see them at postcard shows all the time. They're just a fun genre of postcard collecting, and there is an exhibitor, Daryl Erzberger, who has an exhibit on these. So let's end with a couple of cards to really leave you with an impression of how important these carriers were to the community and all of the people in the community. This particular postcard shows the mail carrier. He stopped along the route. He's got his mail bag on his shoulder, and he's stopping to chat with his buddies along the way. And how proud these carriers were of their work. This particular postcard is one of my favorite. I think it really says it all. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these carriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Rural mail carriers even delivered on Christmas and other holidays. I'm sure that many of you are friends with your carrier. I really like my carrier, Richard. So this tradition really continues. I hope you've enjoyed having a look at some really rare old real photo postcards. And before we go to questions and I stop sharing, just wanted to remind you, please go to americantopical.org. Take a look at all the things we offer for members. Our members have a lot of fun with stamps and postcards. If you are only a postcard collector tonight, by tomorrow you could be a topical collector and we can show you how. And now I will stop sharing, and I'd love to hear your comments, questions, whatever.